Hello, my little luxes. Welcome back to a Scary Stories My Father Told Me. And I am your host, charsielux. And yes, today I am continuing on with this part that I've been wanting. Well, I kind of freshly started, I should say. That until the month of March, I am going to be sharing different Irish fairy tales. So last time I shared the folklore story of bewitched butter, which is along the ideas of a domestic item that is bewitched. So today's story is actually about 12 witches, and it is the Horned Women. So please come gather around the campfire with me and join me for another Irish fairy tale. Supernatural Forces. Introduction. Ireland has a long folkloric history involving witches, ghosts, and enchantment. Whether it's bewitched domestic items, people being transformed into animals or objects, or spooky visitations from beyond the grave, the idea of supernatural help or hindrance is a common theme in fairy tale storytelling. Often the purposes or morality of such interference is beyond our control or understanding, making the stories sometimes frightening and often entertaining, as in the memorable examples gathered here. The Horned Women. A rich woman sat up late one night carding and preparing wool while all the family and servants were asleep. Suddenly, a knock was given at the door, and a voice called out, "Open, open." "Who is there?" said the woman of the house. "I am the witch of the one horn," was answered. The mistress, supposing that one of her neighbors had called and required assistance, opened the door, and a woman entered, having in her hand a pair of wool carders, and bearing a horn on her forehead, as if growing there. She sat down by the fire in silence, and began to card the wool with violent haste. Suddenly she paused, and said aloud, "Where are the women? They delay too long." Then a second knock came to the door, and a voice called as before, "Open, open." The mistress felt herself constrained to rise and open to the call, and immediately a second witch entered, having two horns on her forehead, and in her hand a wheel for spinning wool. "Give me place," she said. "I am the witch of the two horns," and she began to spin as quick as lightning. And so the knocks went on, and the call was heard, and the witches entered, until at last 12 women sat round the fire, the first with one horn, the last with 12 horns. And they carded the thread, and turned their spinning wheels, and wound and wove, all singing together an ancient rhyme, but no words did they speak to the mistress of the house. Strange to hear and frightful to look upon were these 12 women, with their horns and their wheels, and the mistress felt near to death, and she tried to rise that she might call for help, but she could not move, nor could she utter a word or a cry, for the spell of the witches was upon her. Then one of them called to her in Irish and said, "Rise, woman, and make us a cake." Then the mistress searched for a vessel to bring water from the well, that she might mix the meal and make the cake, but she could find none. And they said to her, "Take a sieve and bring water in it." And she took the sieve and went to the well, but the water poured from it, and she could fetch none for the cake. And she sat down by the well and wept. Then came a voice by her and said, "Take yellow clay and moss and bind them together, and plaster the sieve so that it will hold." This she did, and the sieve held the water for the cake. And the voice said again, "Return, and when thou comest to the north angle of the house, cry aloud 3 times, and say, 'The mountain of the Fennin women and the sky over it is all on fire.'" And she did so. When the witches inside heard the call, a great and terrible cry broke from their lips, and they rushed forth with wild lamentations and shrieks, and fled away to Slivamanon, where was their chief abode. But the spirit of the well bade the mistress of the house to enter and prepare her home against the enchantments of the witches, if they returned again. And first, to break their spells, she sprinkled the water in which she had washed her child's feet, the feet water, outside the door of the threshold. Secondly, she took the cake which the witches had made in her absence, of meal mixed with the blood drawn from the sleeping family, and she broke the cake in bits, and placed a bit in the mouth of each sleeper, and they were restored. And she took the cloth they had woven, and placed it half in and half out of the chest with the padlock. And lastly, she secured the door with a great crossbeam fastened in the jambs, so that they could not enter, and having done these things, she waited. Not long were the witches in coming, and they raged and called for vengeance. "Open, open," they screamed. "Open, Feetwater." "I cannot," said the Feetwater. "I am scattered on the ground, and my path is down to the law." "Open, open, wooden trees and beams," they cried to the door. "I cannot," said the door, "for the beam is fixed on the jambs, and I have no power to move." "Open, open, cake that we have made and mingled with blood," they cried again. "I cannot," said the cake, "for I am broken and bruised, and my blood is on the lips of the sleeping children." Then the witches rushed through the air with great cries, and fled back to Slimon, uttering strange curses on the spirit of the well, who had wished their ruin. But the woman in the house was left in peace, and a mantle dropped by one of the witches was kept hung up by the mistress as a sign of the night's awful contest. And this mantle was in possession of the same family for generation to generation for 500 years after. Well, as always, I truly hope you enjoyed that spooky little tale. Now, this one was definitely a little more freakier than what the Bewitched Butter one was. But you know what? I have always had a soft spot for witch stories because when I was a kid, the most frightening ones were always any of the stories that had to do with paranormal, ghosts, and witches. Because the witches would always put a curse on you. So I really enjoyed this one. I like having the little twist where you find out that the family is being overtaken by these 12 witches and that the mistress of the house is given supernatural help from a spirit from the well. So she learned how to save her family and save herself. So it's a cute little tale, and like I said before, that these Irish stories have a moral to them, and it's the same idea as the Brothers Grimm. They're spooky, scary stories to help you learn a lesson. So I definitely hope you enjoyed this. What did you think of it? Have you heard it before? Like I said, these are all stories that are old tales passed down generations, and now I'm excited to share them all with you. Thank you once again for joining me on another Scary Stories My Father Told Me. And if you would like to follow me on any of my other social medias, I will have a link in the description down below. And remember, I am the afterlife of the party, but I would love for you to join me in the afterlife of the party. And the easiest way to do that is to come and be a member on my Patreon. And on the screen, you can see a shout out to all of my fellow membership tiers. Thank you so much for joining me on there. And you get several different perks when you join my tier levels. And a special shout out to my Ultimate Luxes. So thank you so much to Chris Bruner and Bishop. Greatly appreciated. And I am thankful that you are a part of my Ultimate Luxes. And always remember to slay, subscribe, like, and always be yourself. And as always, stay spooky. Until next time, bye.